to talk about everything you need to know about buying a house in the Twin Cities area. I'm Erica Carlson. I'm with a brokerage called Bricks Real Estate. I help people buy and sell real estate all over the Twin Cities and surrounding area. I would say I specialize in residential, houses, townhouses, even multifamily, mostly in that kind of western, northwestern suburb area. I'm definitely not one to brag about my numbers, but I will tell you that I'm a full-time agent and I do keep very busy. My partner is Scott Carlson, who's with the same brokerage, and we both do this business full-time together. Just real quick, we do have a special needs child, and that's a big reason of how we both transferred from similar careers. I was a teacher and then he was in the title business into real estate. His needs have become greater over time, which he's not medically fragile, but there are things about him that do lean more on the medical side. So having a more flexible career has been a good fit for our family. And the second thing is that we're investing in real estate around the Twin Cities, and it just seemed like a natural fit. So when I was frankly burning out a little bit on teaching, I realized that real estate consulting is teaching. It's just a different subject. So I might not be helping kindergartners tie their shoes and talk about their birthday and their teeth falling out and all the things with the tooth fairy. And I do miss those days. However, my heart and my passion really is in the consulting component, the educational component of real estate. And I'm so glad you're here to learn more about buying a house with me. So I do have a favor to ask from you, which is sort of awkward, but if you haven't subscribed yet, and if you haven't liked the video, I would certainly appreciate that for the algorithm gods to help encourage people to find this information. I certainly believe that it's very useful, especially if you haven't purchased a house in a really long time or you're a first-time home buyer. If any point during this video you have any questions about real estate and you would like to talk one-to-one, below there is a link so that we can set up a time to talk. We'll just set it up as a discovery call, so that'll give you time to ask me, anything about buying and selling. There's two things I want to point out before we begin. First of all, on my main website, which I'll have linked below, you can download the free guide for selling and buying. And this information may have some crossover, some repetition for sure, but I am not just reading to you from my smart home buyer guide. And so feel free to download that. There's absolutely no connection. I won't know you're downloading it, whatnot. It's completely free and it's just on the main page. There's also a lot of other videos I've already created going through the smart home buyer guide, chapter by chapter. I don't have it in like one long video like this, and I'm continually still working on those because it is quite a bit of information. So that is why I'm sectioning this one off. The second thing I want to preface is that I am going to talk to you today like I'm your real estate agent, as much as I'm going to try to bounce back and forth and be mindful that I might not be your real estate agent because you live in Tennessee or you live in northern Minnesota. I do think, just for the sake of my sanity, to just be able to speak to you like your future real estate agent is going to be far easier than me constantly saying real estate agents. I'll just speak from my own point of view. You really want to prepare yourself for this journey. Be mindful that there are surprises along the way. We can definitely try to do things we can to mitigate that, to minimize it. And that is going to come with great communication to me, your agent, and to your loan officer. When we are not fully informed of things going on in your life that may be pretty serious and impact things, of course we can't navigate that with you until they come to light. And I have seen everything from people hiding that they've bought cars or credit cards or consolidated student loan debt. I've seen people lose jobs and not want to talk about it. Things have just grown more sophisticated over time. So things that, I have heard of in years past, and, when I say years past, 10, 20, 30 years ago, a lot of those things are not as well hidden, like the job loss, for example. I've actually heard of somebody, they lost their job. Well, don't tell your real estate agent. Okay, well, I don't know, maybe there was a time where like that actually worked out for you, but there's job verification towards the end. So again, lying about these things isn't helpful. And in a few minutes, I will put on the screen, on the screen, the top 10 things you need to do to avoid not having some problems. And if you're not keenly aware of these things, some of them can be very innocent. There was a TikTok video I saw of a girl just sobbing and like using her story to educate people. In short, she was crying because she had taken out a new credit card from a big box store where she just was an autopilot. They were like, do you want to get credit card? It was a $6 item. And she said, sure. And that one more credit pull, that one more line of credit for her was too much. I don't know anything about this person. She was on TikTok. And that put her in a position where she couldn't buy the house. You might know what video I'm talking about. It was very upsetting to see that somebody could lose their house over something so tiny. But if we are on the fringe and we don't understand that our situation is like very much on the edge of losing the house, obviously you want to do everything you can to not put yourself in that situation. So again, my goal as your agent is to try to make it as stress-free as possible. That communication from you is definitely going to be helpful. When I'm face to face with people, I tend to forget that a lot of people don't understand how real estate agents are paid. And so let's just take a moment to talk about that. I do not get paid unless I help you find a house, like actually close on a house. I shouldn't say find a house. I have helped people find houses, and I certainly did not make a paycheck. I'm not saying that to be whiny or complaining. I'm just being matter of fact. There is a severe misconception amongst certain people that we are somehow salaried. There's a lot of misconceptions that when you hit the buttons to those big websites where they have portals going to houses, people oftentimes click it sort of mindlessly, not really understanding what they're triggering. They think that we work for these major website companies. In fact, they're just advertising portals for us to meet people that we wouldn't have otherwise met. And it's great. These portals are great. They make things easier for the consumer, and they certainly make things easier for me as a real estate agent. However, me running out and showing one house to somebody who's not serious about purchasing a house, never wants to talk to me again, purely sees my ability to open the door and that I have legal access to go into strangers' properties, and that's it. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's my job. But I can't change that concept for somebody who's coming into the situation saying, you're simply a door opener, or you're simply going to just fill out this contract for me. There's so many more nuances, and I truly believe in my heart that my skills far exceed my ability to even find you a house, let alone just get you inside of a house. So going back to the fee, like I said, I don't get paid unless you actually purchase and close a house, which means I'm 100% commission based, which means I'm actually very invested in you actually succeeding in your goals. And so that communication of what are we shopping for? What are we not shopping for? How do we maximize our time? It's not about whether we see 60 houses or we see one house and what is right or wrong in that process. It's about what do you need to accomplish that goal. And I will be on that ride with you as long as everything we're doing is productive and etc. This is what I do for a living. I think I told you before, I am a full-time agent, so I am fully invested into looking for this house when you are serious about it. And so that leads us easily to our next chapter, which is if you find a property that's not on the MLS, typically these would be for sale by owner. What you're going to want to do, in my opinion, is not reach out to that person without your agent. If you plan on having representation, whether it's going to a new construction builder, a for sale by owner, or anybody else, you're not calling the sign on the front lawn. You are asking your agent to do that. That is a part of like how we're making our money, is doing these things for you. You certainly don't need to be out making these phone calls, accidentally saying things that can be held against you in negotiations. Let us do our job at the highest level for you. Let us make the phone calls. So if you see a really cute development that you drove by and you're curious about it, instead of popping in on a Saturday, I would surely be talking to my real estate agent and making sure that either they're calling in advance for you so that they know you have representation, because you may not realize, but you may be, by excluding that person, which again you may want to, that I'm not judging you, but if you want representation, you like, again, if I want the hairstylist to cut my hair for me, then I need to be with my hairstylist. I don't go and then say, oh yeah, that lady that I talked to that one time, I'd like her to do the job. No, she should have been a part of the job from day one. And I hope that makes sense. Let's talk about the mortgage pre-approval. Nobody's favorite conversation for sure. I'll tell you why I know that, because you all like to just call me on a house you found on said website. You don't want to think about what your budget is, whether you can afford it, not afford it, could afford more. And I want to implore you that as much as I love getting the phone call first, I can be sort of stumped when I don't know what someone's financing is. We need to know, you need to know, actually you need to know. It's not important to me what the price is. The other confusion is like, people are far, generally before they're educated, they're far too interested in, I can go to X. Okay, so let's use 400. I can spend up to 400K on a house. So my next question for you, in like not a threatening way, is, but how did you come up with that number? Do you have some sort of mortgage calculator that you're sitting there? Are you putting the right numbers in? Do you know what the current interest rate is? Do you know how much home insurance is? Are you shopping for townhouses and condos? Are you shopping for a house? All these things are changing the numbers. What are the property taxes? Are the property taxes you're pulling actually the property taxes for that property? I hate to tell you, but most of the time it's advertised wrong, which again, as a professional, we know that. We look out for that and we look out for you. So I think when we are thinking about dollars, yes, the first question is, will somebody finance the deal? Who's going to be my mortgage company, who's my loan officer? Because I'm going to be working with this person intensely. I can give you names to local and reliable loan officers who will do a fantastic job for you. You can shop this around. I can give you loads of tips and questions and things to ask so that you can make an educated decision about your mortgage company. I think this is an extremely important step. I think it's crazy, sorry to all of you that do this, that jump to house shopping. I know you instinctively know I'm here, but what that doesn't tell you is the biggest piece, which is your actual monthly payment. I don't really care if you can go to 350, 500, 700, 90,000. I don't care the number. You shouldn't care about that number either. I mean, yes, it's important once we're house shopping, but you're at step one, which is, do I get pre-approved? And two, what do I want my monthly to be? So you're going to sit down and have a private conversation with a partner. If you're purchasing with your family member, if you're purchasing with a romantic partner, if you're purchasing by yourself, you're going to sit down and you're going to think about all the bills that come with owning a house. Because my assumption is you might be coming from renting if you're listening to this, maybe. Obviously, if you're an experienced homeowner, you understand the list is the list, okay? There's lots of things online to help you figure out your budget. I know it's hard when you've never owned a house before to get an idea of like, what's my water bill? What's my garbage bill? Again, if it's a townhouse, if it's a regular house, all these things are going to factor into these details that are hard to figure out, but we can get the gist of it. You minus out your current rent, let's say, and then all these new bills. And the truth of the matter is, and I don't know that you're all prepared to hear this, because most of you are going to tell me that my rent is here and I want to pay less for a house. And I understand why, because we're all in the same situation as, why would I want to spend more? Of course you don't want to spend more. This is an extremely important concept. You're probably going to spend more because you're buying a house. And I know, I don't know how to say this, but it sucks. There's no other way to say it. It probably is a little cheaper to rent, and somebody else is responsible for the roof leaking, the fridge breaking, new flooring, paint, etc. So there's obviously a pros and cons. That's not the point of this video. So you've accepted that, or you want to purchase a house. And so the next step is, what are all the bills And now where's my mortgage payment? And the next question I'm going to ask you, and if you've worked with me, you know this is coming. I'm going to say, hey, friend, it's the perfect house. It's in the perfect location. Perfect, I know, hard judgment word, but it's perfect, perfect, perfect for you. We're not talking about for the world, for you. I've hit all the markers, and I don't, now what's the price? And the truth of the matter is, for most of us, you're going to give me a number, and then you're going to realize, actually, it's higher if it was all those things. Let's work with that. Not because that's the number we want you to end up on, but like that's kind of our worst case scenario. And in the event that I can get this fantastic house, that's my payment. And we're never going to exceed that. That's the number I'm going to ask you never, ever to exceed. Not because I'm actually invested in I'm here to help you buy a house. It's not about your finances to me. But it's important to me that you don't default on the loan, that you're not upset, that you're not house rich and cash poor, and you're going to have to invest that homework into that. Your loan officer is going to set some limits after they ask you questions. That's one question, but you have to set your own personal limit. And I truly hope this part of the video really helps somebody out there that might have never thought about it this way. So we're going to convert that number into the big number, meaning the big number is the purchase price. So I'm just making up numbers. I'm willing to pay $2,500 a month for this really fantastic fictitious house that doesn't exist yet. Now we tell the loan officer and we say, okay, under the current situation, which is typically interest rates and any other fees, where am I at for $2,500? And they're going to convert that into the big number. And that's the number we're going to use to go house shopping. I know I was long-winded on that section. It's because it's so unbelievably important that you stop and think about this piece before ever looking at a single house. The other thing that I need to say out loud that so many people just kind of shove under the rug, you are asking homeowners. Yes, I know some houses are vacant and some people have tenants in them. You're asking, for the most part, people to clean the house, get their pets, grab their babies, vacuum and clean for you, and step out for an hour. And if that is when you're sick, it's not fair. When you're not pre-approved, it's not fair. They are assuming you are a viable buyer serious about purchasing their house. And that is the agreement that real estate agents make when we go through school. We are being told over and over again that if we're asking somebody to vacate their property for a showing, I'm not doing this for me. I don't put this caveat up, but there's a lot of realtors that are never going to turn a key if you're not pre-approved because they're thinking about the seller and they're thinking that is so unfair to that mom with the 3-year-old and the 1-year-old and the dog and the cat and the bird, and nobody's home to help me with all of this, and I have to somehow pick up the dirty clothes, You know where I'm going with this. A little bit more empathy for each other would go a long way in this industry, because unlike buying a car or a pair of jeans, you are really inconveniencing somebody for your showing. Now, the assumption, on the other hand, is they want to sell their house and they're going to do what that takes. But we all have limits. And so when I'm a listing agent, I'm always preparing people for the impact of leaving your house for these showings. And hopefully it's going to go by really quick and be painless and They're nervous about letting you in. The potentiality of something being broken or taken on purpose or accident, or that they're being inconvenienced. A lot of people work from home. So when you're shopping with a pre-approval, you're hitting all these markers. You have the confidence that you know exactly what you're shopping for, and that's going to be a great thing for you and everybody else. So before we move on to the next section, you're probably wondering, what about cash? Or maybe you're not thinking about it at all because you're thinking, well, I'm cash, I don't need a loan. The problem is we still need a proof of funds. It is not enough to just say, I have the money. And just to be clear, and I know this might sound obvious to some of you, so I apologize, but when we say cash, we mean for all of it, not like your monthly payment. And I have had people that don't quite understand, like, we're talking the full $400,000 or, whatever you're paying. And obviously most of us are not that blessed to have that kind of money. So if you are, you need a proof of funds, and I can definitely help you determine what proper documentation is. We can black out certain things if there's like details that like let's say it was your full social security number, you can black out a majority of that to still show it's you, but it does need to be something with like your actual name. It doesn't mean it needs to be liquid in that moment, but it definitely needs to be able to be liquefied. So of course we want to identify the house that is best for you. And one way I like to think about this is, wants, needs, and wishes. Ideally, we're going to sit down and have a meeting. I always start with like a basic Google form that I send out to people. But we need to get into the depths of what you are shopping for. It needs to go beyond the budget, beyond just a simple location search. And, it's getting into the style of the house and how big of a yard do you need. And frankly, if I can understand your why, not your why of like why you're moving, though that's always interesting to discuss. It's like the why behind those things and making sure that we're on the same page, because there's some words that are really subjective that make it hard. Now, some words I can't do anything with them in terms of our computer search. So you say, I want a spacious layout. That's a lot of adjectives that the computer isn't going to understand. That isn't how we filter houses. So we're going to have to do that by going through the pictures. But there is a way to define like how big my yard is, or, that I don't want this style house versus that style house. And then the why behind that. Maybe then I can be creative with you. So here's a really good example. You say I need or I want 4 bedrooms, but I ask you, what if we found a house with 3 bedrooms and then there was like a den or an unfinished basement or, something like that. And you go, yeah, sure, that could work. I could do 3 bedrooms if I had the capacity to build out a 4th bedroom. Then what we should do is bump your search to 3 bedrooms and stop always just looking for 4, because we're going to open up that funnel. For so many years, again, this is April 2024, we just like don't have inventory. So as you're like saying, here's all my wants, needs, deal breakers, wishes, right? The funnel went from this to there's nothing to buy anymore, or there's these little tiny thing to buy. And so I need to start opening it back up, because you said, well, I have to have half acre. Well, what about a 0.3 acre, like just making things up right now. Okay, I want this school district, but are you open to this school district too? So some of the stuff can be kind of obvious, but I have to ask those questions. So you can do this at any point for yourself. I would make 3 lists. Needs, like I cannot bend on this, these are my wants and these are my wishes. And I think the 3 list is kind of nice versus just wants and needs. And of course, deal breakers are important too. Like if you say, I just absolutely have to have central air conditioning. I'm not doing window air conditioning. I don't want mini splits, whatever. I've had these things, I'm not interested. That's completely fine. Step 3 is understanding how the market can impact your home buying experience. This is very easy to think of if you were shopping during the COVID years, the pandemic years, right? Obviously, buying a house isn't like buying groceries or something else like that, because these market conditions are determining your outcome. And so I just shared with you that the inventory has been really tight, and maybe one day I will be a real estate agent and I'll say there's nothing but inventory. I was a home shopper during the other side of this, which was there was too much inventory. Everything was available, just choice. And that actually makes it harder to make a choice. I know you don't want to hear that if you're shopping right now, because you're probably thinking there's nothing to pick from and you're whining about too much choice. But psychologically, it's a bad thing. When they give us 30 brands of toothpaste, the brain actually just says there's too much choice. So try to embrace the fact that you have minimal choice right now. I know you don't believe me, but I still threw it out there. I want you to be careful with what you're hearing on the news. Some of it is extremely misleading and just flat out wrong. Most of it is like, it's innocently wrong. Like they're pulling data that's 6 months old and, we're in the spring market and they're still referring to things that were in the fall market. So it's really important you understand what's happening right now in your experience, so that you're writing offers that makes sense. You don't want to, let's say, for example, nobody is getting under contract on a house that's contingent on their house selling. you certainly don't want to be like the one person that writes offers that way, because you're going to find this a very frustrating process. So bottom line, like the news is just looking at overall trends, national trends. And so like I know personally, I put out a weekly video that I've been doing for about a year, where I tell people what's going on in our market centers so that there is no misconceptions. If you're watching and you're listening, I'm telling you, how fast it takes for things to sell, whether it's a buyer seller market, absorption rate, and things like that, which sounds really boring, but it's actually really useful information. So understanding months of inventory, or what we call absorption rate, is extremely important, because we need to know if we're in a balanced market, a seller's market, or a buyer's market. We're always talking about this. We're always watching it. Within a year, we can see it go back and forth. It's not like it just stays in one position. It's very seasonal. So most of the time when these swings are happening, they're kind of predictable. So winter markets generally, again, I'm in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, it will slow down, meaning it'll become a buyer's market. So there might not necessarily be a huge influx of inventory, but the houses that are on the market, maybe the sellers are a little bit more motivated to sell. Maybe you can get a deal. You'll see the houses sitting longer, so there might be some more negotiation. Versus spring, I don't know, something about spring. Everybody comes out and wants to shop for a house before the summer. Minnesotans love their summers. We don't like to give that up. So summer is actually a good time to buy a house too, because everybody is doing their lake, their summer thing. And so you can go against the grain and go ahead and buy a house when nobody else is thinking about real estate. Spring is going to be the hardest time to buy a house. As a buyer, a great time to sell a house, but I'm not talking to you about selling today. So you have to be prepared for multiple offers. You have to expect that it might take a little bit longer, depending on your price point, depending on what part of the Twin Cities you're shopping in. All these things are going to determine what kind of market you're in. It's important you know this information before you start. Again, if you're coming in asking for closing costs, you're asking for a discounted rate off the asking price. Again, you have a contingency, like I need a house to sell. These things could really be a detriment and really make this process pretty unpleasant for you, because you're going against the grain of like what's happening out there. All right, step 4, finding the possibilities. The internet, obviously, fantastic tool for all of us. It has really opened up and made looking and finding a house so much easier than it was in the past. You will definitely out-research your real estate agent, because you're just more invested, and you're going to just probably spend a lot more time scouring and looking and analyzing all these things. So you may think that's a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing. I know a lot of you are going to Google the owner. You're going to be on LinkedIn doing different things. It's my job to help you sift and interpret research, kind of pulling out like what's significant versus what's not significant. So remember, I'm here to help you negotiate terms to get the house locked down. It's perfectly fine that you're using the internet to do this research. Just remember that not everything online is what's actually available, and vice versa. We want to be mindful of that. And in the past, a very big real estate website would not publish contingencies. And so a majority of my phone calls that I would take through that particular platform, I was telling people it's not actually for sale. They've improved that detail, which is like such a huge blessing. I think it's definitely reduced my phone calls because of that. But you have to be mindful. These website portals do not have a responsibility to you, the consumer, for accuracy of data. And there is oftentimes more information than what you're able to see. Even on my own website, iHeartMinneapolisHomes.com, I don't have full functionality and control. Like I had a seller once say, well, why don't you say the house says this? And I'm like, well, it's coming from the MLS and it's coming through. So I don't have like a lot of control. On Zillow, for example, I've seen cities wrong on houses where every other platform has the city right, but for some reason, Zillow's thing is like overturning it. And so I'm getting phone calls on houses that aren't even on our area because they're just like pulling the wrong address. I feel like one in Canada one time. It was very strange. So we have to then reach out and try to get these portals to change. But again, they're out of our thing. And I know I'm talking to a group of buyers, but like it's estimates, okay? Take those with a grain of salt. That's not a real human analyzing the house. It's based on tax records. It's based on comparable sales in the area. It's nice. It can be spot on. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means like, so you list your house and then you'll see the price will change to whatever you listed it for, because it's new data for the program to digest. So again, my job is to help you negotiate the best terms. It's to help you with the process. So none of these things are inherently good or bad. It's just things have changed over the years in real estate. So if I can say this to make your life a lot easier, the tools you're using to look for houses will make the process easier or harder. So I think like some of these website portals are great for beginning stages when you're just like, I don't know if I want a townhouse versus a house. I don't know if I want to live on this city or that city. And you should know what's possible. But as you're fine tuning, as you're saying, I'm ready to make this leap into home ownership, or it's time for me to buy a new house, it's time for you, honestly, to probably get off these portals and start using the MLS. Not only can I configure it so that it's very customized to exactly what you're telling me you want to buy, I've realized my clients can do some things on their end where they can fine tune it. And like if they say, well, I want to know what's on this side of town, they can go do that without necessarily leaving the MLS. That is our main data hub. So when you keep running off to all these different portals, the chances of that information being accurate is just sort of going down. So be mindful of that. So I hinted on this before, but it's incredibly important once you've committed to your real estate agent to let the real estate agent do their job. If you have absolutely no representation, then of course you don't have a choice. What I mean is you're driving down the street and you see a really cute house. I give my clients an app to do some research. We're not calling the sign because you're going to be engaging with a new salesperson. And in the event that you do decide to buy that house, the questions they ask, they may lead to some things about you and putting you in a worse negotiation position than if you hadn't made that phone call. Same with these website portals. You see a cute house. Sorry, I'm using cute in like a loose sense of the term. An attractive house, a house you like. Substitute cute for a different word. You want to call your agent and let them do the work for you. Let them contact the owners. If it's a first sale by owner, let them do their job. There's just absolutely no reason for you to be doing all of that. That is the whole point of representation. I'm trained, frankly, to do it correctly, and to protect your interests, because that's my job, is to protect you through the process. And sometimes, you just pop your head in that open house and you think, they just start asking questions and you start telling them things, and then you write an offer later and they go, oh, is that the redhead and the tall person? And then they told me they never bought a house before and that they can put 50,000 down and and you've written, I don't know, it just talk about things backfiring. So yes, you can go to open houses. You certainly do not need your real estate agent every time you go in. You can sign in with my name and number instead of yours. And you can certainly introduce yourself and say, Erica Carlson from Bricks is my real estate agent. And again, this might be changing this summer. So I don't know how open houses are going to roll out. But in the event they expect you to sign in or not, you should be introducing yourself as having an agent. To protect your interests. It's not your job to disclose your whole life story to them. You can give them feedback on the house, and they can certainly pass that on to the seller. The things you liked, the things you didn't like. It is not, important to share your situation. And a little known fact that's not really a secret, but you might have never thought about it. Open house isn't so much for you as the consumer. We know the odds of you picking a house based on an open house is extremely limited, not impossible. So they're doing that to meet new clients. So when you're signing in and you're giving them your information, no offense to these people, but you just become a prospect for somebody to work with. And so if you want an agent and you have an agent, you should lead with that. Now, if you're open, right, and we haven't committed to working with each other, or a different, again, I'm speaking as the assumption, you can certainly tell them that you're open and you'd be interested in getting to know their style, but just be mindful of that. Let's talk about for sale by owners. They're not very common. I think actually they used to be more common than they are today. I could definitely pull some stats, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. For sale by owners are called FSBOs. It's just an acronym for saying the owner is trying to cut out real estate agents. They don't have a real estate agent. They may or may not be willing to compensate a buyer's agent. Certainly they tend to be when they find a buyer. And, can they be a good deal? Yes, they can be. I am trained to help you determine if they're priced according to market value or not. I have certainly helped people get really great houses that, that where the person didn't have representation, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot because they weren't actually charging enough for the house. I was still able to negotiate my fees so that my buyers were not paying out of pocket for my services. And so, I'm going to go to bat for you and help you make that contact. So if you do find one, you would just send that information. Even if it says no realtors, we can figure that out together. Foreclosures and short sales are things that really intrigue people that are looking for a deal. There's not a lot of these at this current moment of making this video. We can certainly get you a list of those, but my normal question will be when somebody's interested is, what about that is appealing to you? Because there's downfalls, and there's people that are extremely knowledgeable, and that's exactly what they want to purchase, and they know why they want to purchase it. Typically, you're dealing with the bank or a lender, right? I'm going to say bank, lender sort of interchangeably. There is, first of all, with short sales, they're never short. That's not what they mean. They don't mean you get to close quickly. In fact, they can be some of the longest transactions and be much more likely to fall apart. Short sale means the seller is short and they're trying to get out of essentially their mortgage, their contract with their lender, so that they can be free of that debt. The lender has to sign off on it, which is why it's so complicated. The lender has to decide if they're willing to go short on it, and that's problematic. So they're very stressful for the seller, of course. They're trying to avoid a foreclosure, which is going to be a little bit better for them in the long run to go short versus a foreclosure. There's not a lot of these on the market, and we can certainly navigate those. I wouldn't, if I wasn't an investor, I don't know that I would be necessarily just focusing on short sales because the options are limited. But they are, it is a stress situation. It's not necessarily a time where you're going to be able to negotiate. Like if you get an inspection, which you can, it doesn't mean that they're going to have the means to repair this or that. So they're oftentimes sort of an as-is element of, it is what it is. Foreclosures are for sure in that as-is state. Like, again, you can do your inspections. They're not going to be super keen on your, contingencies. Like if you had a house to sell, it's probably just not going to be an offer they're going to accept. There can oftentimes be ability to bump people. You can sometimes buy these types of properties at auctions. Being a slightly more savvy buyer, I mean, you could buy one of these as your first house, but they're not the easy button, and they could come with some things. And the first thing that comes to mind is that risk element that you're not getting on the foreclosure. You're not going to get any sort of disclosure. So when I say as is, and I mean just like it is what it is. Like there may be plumbing, there might not be plumbing. There might be a fridge on Monday and you could come back and close in 3 weeks and somebody's taken the fridge out. And so you have to take pictures of things. And, but the inspections can be even hard because like they'll oftentimes winterize the house and you're not going to be permitted to turn the water back on to make sure it works. So it's kind of risk upon risk. And if you're a first time home buyer, that might just be a little intense. And oftentimes it's just not for, lots of people will never even consider these. Now, for somebody else, they might say, I have the ability to do this and I want something a little bit more worn out and I want to do the fixes. The problem typically comes if without me getting too deep in foreclosures and short sales, that people don't understand is where's the money coming from? Because oftentimes we're going to be limited on the type of financing we can use. Sometimes they just need to be cash only, because you have to understand banks don't typically lend money on things that are really in harsh conditional shape. So, there's a lot of chipping paint, there's a lot of safety issues. I'm going to just sound like such a jerk. People will call and I will look up the pictures on the house and I'll say, yeah, the bathroom's completely unfinished. The kitchen's been completely stripped. There's absolutely no flooring here. this is just not a house that's going to get financing. So it's not about whether it's a foreclosure or a short sale. It's that the condition of the house and the fact that you need a mortgage, we already have a contradicting issue here, which is, how are we going to buy this? It doesn't matter that you can fix it up. Who is going to give you the money? Because a standard lender is not. So now it's leaning to cash. Now, do you have that kind of cash? Now, then the next problem is, I have that kind of cash, but now where do I get the money to continue to fix it up? Yes, there's rehab loans and things like that to explore, but that's a whole nother conversation. And I'm not a loan officer. So if you are really interested in a true fixer-upper situation, it is incredibly important you're sharing that with your loan officer, because you can't qualify for an FHA loan or a VA or a USDA loan. We're out shopping with a government-backed loan, and you want a house with no kitchen, no flooring, and water dripping through the roof. That's not a judgment. Those houses exist. I've seen the nicest and I've seen the worst. It's not about judging. It's about your ability to purchase it. And remember, my goal is for you to actually purchase a house, not to be wasting your time looking at the wrong properties. Let's talk about step 5. We're going to talk about making a decision. No doubt, buying a house is an important decision. Financially, it's a really big deal. It's not mine to make. I've definitely worked with people that are constantly looking to me to sort of approve the house, and that's not my job. You're not going to get pressure from me to make any sort of decision or to tell you what to buy. So of course, if you're in a buyer's market, you're going to probably have all the time in the world to process and sleep on it and think. We can't say the same when we're in a seller's market or even a balanced market as much, because these houses tend to sell relatively quickly, especially ones that are in great condition, that are priced well, staged well. Oftentimes, it is not unusual for me to show somebody a house, let's say at 10 in the morning, and by noon, I'm calling them and saying, I know you've had like a moment to think about this, but they're expecting offers at 6 p.m. Are we working on this afternoon, or are you going to give this one a pass? That is a high pressure situation, not making it easy for you to make decisions, which is why we went through the wants and the needs and the deal breakers, because we don't have time to look at properties that don't meet your needs for obvious reasons, which is, frankly, it's a waste of time for everybody involved. I'm not speaking from a selfish position, but again, the seller's left for you and you don't know what you're buying, That's why I always do an exploratory tour when I first meet people. I always offer that. So if you've had me as your agent, you know that I said, hey, do you want to just get out there? No pressure, no expectation. We go look at 3 to 5 properties just to get a sense of what our money's going to get in the Twin Cities market. So going back to the seller's market thing, I have met people and I have said, this is just horrible of me. I just showed you this house. I have a text message from the listing agent. They want to know in this moment, are you writing an offer? That's going to feel awfully fast to most of us. It feels fast to me. Like, I'm actually legitimately uncomfortable when I tell people this. Like, it brings no joy in my heart to say, buy it or don't buy it. Like, what a horrible thing to say to somebody. But houses are snowflakes. Even if it's a townhouse and there's, 20 of the same thing, the thing that makes it a snowflake is the way it's facing, the land it's on. That is one of a kind. Even if we all have the same floor plans, one is facing the north and one's facing the south, and this person has a slightly longer driveway or, whatever. So these snowflakes, which are houses in this situation, it really is too bad. And of course, I want you to feel confident and good and comfortable with your decisions. I don't like taking that away from people. And so therefore, when you find that house, you need to draft your offer immediately. If you're really loving on a house and you think, well, let's talk about it tomorrow, let's talk about it in 48 hours, you could certainly be actually all that time thinking about it. Somebody else is drafting an offer. And I have this rule that if you like it, somebody else likes it. That just seems to be the way real estate works. So if you're having some hesitations, a way to work around that is to indicate to your real estate agent that I think I'm pretty serious about this one. Maybe it's like an 80% for me. I feel like I could be a 90 or 100% on this decision, but I legitimately want to sleep on this. I'm never going to tell you you're wrong, but what I should do for you in turn is indicate to the other agent that you are that serious, because in the event that they get an offer while you're sleeping on it, they could just go with that offer. There's absolutely nothing from the seller's point of view. You're not presenting anything, so therefore you're not presenting seriousness. But a kind of a middle ground is at least telling your agent, I'm getting serious about this one, but making this decision in this moment isn't comfortable for me. Let's talk in the morning. Sometimes just buying that little bit of time, saying that one text message that I send out and say, we had a great showing today. Please let me know if you receive other offers. Now, that doesn't mean in the next 5 minutes I could get, yep, actually we have an offer, and we're not gonna sleep on it. We're ready to make a decision. That can really put this process in high drive. And the nice thing about this video is you're being warned now. Versus a lot of times I'm telling people this over text and phone calls. It's certainly something I haven't talked about, but if you're buying the house with another person, you need to obviously be fully in tune with each other, and these lists and things I'm talking about should be made together. There's certain decisions in life where like the one that always comes to my mind immediately is like, we're gonna have to agree on whether we're having a baby, because we're not having half a baby. And we're going to certainly have to agree on what house we're buying, because I'm not buying half of this house and you're buying half of that house. And so it's really important you guys continue to communicate with each other. And if one person feels like it's a no, we do need to listen to that person's voice. And, I can't imagine how complicated it's in people's homes if one person's pushing for it. Just anecdotally, this wasn't my client, it was somebody I know, but shown a lot of houses and everybody seemed really serious about it, but they were going back and forth in negotiations, and finally she spoke up and said, I just don't want this house. And that explained why the negotiations were going back and forth, because what we didn't know, or the person that was telling me the story didn't know, was we don't know what they're talking about behind closed doors. And I think it's just a better decision to walk away than, to put any sort of pressure on anybody to, make a decision. And let's talk about drafting an offer. This can be it's very exciting and it's a little intimidating. And the nice thing is you're not doing it alone. If you've decided on a house, what typically happens when you work with me is we're going to a lot of times take a break, because we've seen a lot of houses. It might be time for dinner or lunch or something. A lot of times, frankly, I just drive home or back to my office where my computer is. And what I put together is a bunch of paperwork that is contractual. It's called a purchase agreement, no matter where you are in the United States. That's what it's called. And in some ways, you can just think of it as a proposal. But I don't want you to be like loose thinking about it in your mind, like it's just a proposal. Well, it is a legal contract, and so you really do need to take the terms you're putting together on paper. I'll do this on your behalf. I'll be asking you questions, and then we're going to go through the details of the contract. And yes, it is more nuanced than just saying, what do you want to offer? We're going to get into market conditions. We're going to look at numbers together. It is not all going to fall on you, but you are the ultimate decision maker. I can certainly advise and tell you what I think is more likely to be a yes and a no, but I do not have a crystal ball. I will always try to help you put your best foot forward. And it's important for you to know that you may get only one chance at this. Now, whether you go into multiple offers, meaning you're competing against other people, the first thing for you to know is it's a silent auction. It's not some bloodbath of everybody yelling in some room like an auction house or something, which is how, I don't want to be in a bidding war. Well, let's not define it like that, because it's not a bidding war. It is a silent auction with professionals who are going to help you put your best terms and your highest offer together. Now, what do I mean by best terms? Because that's a pretty subjective comment. Best is going to first be asked by the seller. What do you want for a closing date? Do you have any preferences about these other details on the contract? We all know they want top price, but it still needs to appraise. So it's my job to not only walk you through all the blanks on the contract, but also I'm going to come up with other ideas that might make your offer stand out. And you don't have to say yes to anything. I can walk you through every nuanced deal that you could, or concept you could put on a contract. And not, if none of it is comfortable to you, you absolutely don't have to do that. So you're going to put it together based on the information you have and what you're comfortable with, and we will submit it on your behalf. And we wait, and there's no amount of time. Typically it takes a couple days. You will not necessarily get an answer in the next hour. If you're lucky, you will. But oftentimes you're going to go to bed and not have an answer, and you could wake up the next day and not have an answer, and it will drive you insane. And you have to just kind of focus on other things in the meantime. So the sellers have a choice when they get an offer. They can accept it. They can flat out reject it, which they often will if they really don't like the terms and the price you've offered. And they can counter any little detail of all the check boxes that we fill out. Anything can be countered. Sometimes it's just minute details that probably don't really matter in the scheme of things. And other times it's major things like price and closing date. Maybe they want to rent back. Maybe they need a delayed possession because they need time. Maybe they need a contingency to find a house of their own. There's also, but again, we're trying to extract that before we write our offer, so there's not a lot of major surprises. When we're in multiple offers, we really need to be aware that there's really that one shot. You cannot assume they're going to come back. So it's like, if your thinking is, well, I'm going to go a little low and hopefully this will stick, or hopefully they'll counter me and then we'll kind of meet in the middle, which is normal. Like, a lot of us think that way. The problem is if other people are involved, which most of the time they are, then how's that going to work for you when somebody else came in $5,000, $10,000 higher than you? Or didn't ask for closing costs, or didn't have a house to sell. So these are just some examples. So if you really want the house, that's why you want to find out what when they say I want highest and best, best is them. What do they define best? And highest is obviously the price. So where do you say, here's my limit, and this is where I think the house is worth, and if somebody pays a penny more, they can have it. And it's important to think that way. Before we move on, deciding how much you're going to offer is very subjective, and ultimately what the house is worth is whatever you're willing and able to pay. The seller has I like to think of their price as a marketing price. Now that could be their bare bones price. You never want to dismiss that the listing price is the price. There are sellers that say, if I'm listing it for this, that'd be the absolute lowest I would take. When you see a house that you think is grossly overpriced, you don't necessarily have to write an offer on it. You may want to just pause and say, this isn't the time to write an offer. I want to see if the seller is going to back down on the price. So I'm going to say insult. I don't really mean that word. Annoy them with this offer. But, again, you can always try things. So a part of my guidance is to help you determine the price with the market data that we have, considering like what can we figure out from their motivation, how many offers, if any, do they have already on the house, what situationally can we gather from this situation, and what can I do other than offer these folks all the money, because there are ways to sweeten things without money. So you just want to be careful going with a severe lowball offer. And now I know you might not know what that means. It kind of depends on the context of the price and everything, so it's hard for me to give you cues on that. But it can really weaken your position in the long term if you go, well, here, I'm just throwing a number, 30,000 under asking. They might just not even want to negotiate with you. I hate to get too in the weeds on this, but one of the terms that you're going to have to consider is earnest money. This is not down payment. This is good faith money, or in earnest. So it's a very expensive purchase, and so nobody expects you to reach in your back pocket and give them the total amount. So you're giving them a portion. In our market, about 1% is pretty typical, 2% more. I mean, the more you put down on earnest money, the stronger financially you are, and you're conveying to the sellers that you have more cash. And again, if you're in multiple offers, this could be a way of sort of trumping everybody else. This money stays in the trust account, typically of the listing agent, sometimes the title company. If you decide not to purchase the house because of an inspection issue, an appraisal issue, you lost your job, you'll get that earnest money back depending on how the contract's written. You can sweeten your offer by making that money non-refundable at some point. I do believe like earnest money is handled differently in different states. So I'm speaking for the Twin Cities area, but part of it is like what you can afford. And again, that 1 to 2% ratio is what you should expect. Earnest money is a credit, assuming you move forward with the purchase. It'll be a credit to your closing costs or your down payment. So it's not really like at any point other than canceling the contract that you get the money back. A simple way to think about it is you're not going to get the earnest money back if you do something to mess up the deal, like buy a car, change jobs, things like that. You might not get your earnest money back. It's not going to protect those kinds of oopsies, using that word loosely. If the earnest money though or you're going to get the earnest money back if like you had an inspection and then the foundation's failing and you don't want to buy this one anymore, then you're going to get your earnest money back. You can certainly get into disputes with sellers over the earnest money. That is a thing. You can end up in small claims court if these things aren't worked out very well. This can be a very complicated topic, and so it is very important we think about how much you're putting down, what risks you're willing to take around that money. And so we'll definitely work that out together. The next section of the contract is going to ask you about personal property. There may be things you want excluded, and we're not going to list like their bed and couch and all that kind of stuff. We're assuming they're going to take those things with them. Think beyond the basics, like the swing set in the backyard. Maybe you don't have kids, you're not interested in adopting that thing. Maybe you ask them to remove it before the sale closes. There's an old basketball hoop, things like that. On the flip side, they may be asking, you may want the flat screen panel, TV panel that's on the wall, because it's kind of a gray area, the way it's mounted. It might stay with the house, it might not. So we want to outline the personal property. Now, people have definitely sold properties fully furnished. It's not very common in our area. So a lot of times, a lot of people say, well, I want to leave all this stuff behind. I think a better way to think about it is ask if you can leave these things behind. Tell people when you're selling a house, you intend on leaving X, Y, and Z, and I don't intend on leaving this. Like things like pool tables kind of come to mind, even like maybe an above ground pool. Just again, these gray areas, but we're not going to list everything. So just a real quick way to think about personal property. And I was looking around my room here, like the lamp, like I can pick it up, but if the lamp was screwed into the wall, it might be considered a part of the real property or the real estate. Closing date is an important term, and one I always try to get the answer to on your behalf before we write the contract. It's extremely important to know if the seller needs time to find their own house, whether they want to be out quickly. If the house is vacant, we can kind of assume they want a quick closing date. But, listen, there's always exceptions to rules. So you want to ask instead of assume what that person wants. I've seen people request for out as far as 6 to 7 months, which is not normal. Okay, you should not be anticipating a seller wanting that. You want to anticipate a 30-day closing. If that is not something that seems reasonable to you, whether your rental agreement is going to go longer than that, maybe you have a house to sell, it's really important we talk about timing just as a general conversation between client and real estate agent. We certainly do not want to be out looking at houses 9 months before your lease expires. It is far too out there. Yes, there's a very small chance we're going to find a seller who says, cool, that's fine, I'll give you 9 months to buy my house. But there's financial implications to having a long closing date like that in some situations. Logistical things. I mean, what could happen to you in 9 months that a deal could fall apart? So there's like a lot of risk. You need to be prepared for 30 to 45 days as kind of a general rule of thumb. It's really important, understand when I say 30 to 45, I mean from the point of getting a yes, because remember, we're talking about drafting an offer. So the assumption is I'm going to put the closing date I want, but I want to be mindful of what the seller wants. And again, most want 30 to 45 days. Can't land on a weekend, can't land on a national holiday. The next item on the contract that comes with kind of an assumption that we're going to do it when you have a loan is a financing contingency. If you are purchasing a house with cash, you don't get that little that catch that if you were to lose your job, suddenly you don't need to purchase the house. Now, I suppose somebody could arrange some sort of contingency like that, but a traditional purchase with a loan is going to have this financing contingency, which were to protect you in the event you couldn't qualify for the loan throughout the transaction. Again, you lost your job or something like that, where life really changed, and we kind of have that basket to catch you in and say, it's okay, you're not on the hook to purchase the house because you were not able to get a loan. A big question I'm going to have for you when you're writing your offer is, are you choosing to get an inspection? As a licensed realtor, I'm always going to recommend that you get one, but I'm also going to be honest and tell you if I know that we're in multiple offers and that this is a term that other people may be leaving off, and it doesn't make me feel good. Like, I never want someone to skip an inspection because of the competitive nature, but we are in the real world, which is if they get 5 offers, 4 say no inspection, and the 5th says yes, and you're the 5th, I would like to think that will not impact your ability to get a house, but I'm speaking plainly. It's important, and I think you should get one, and I think it's worth every penny. And I don't think you're wasting money by getting one, and let's say the deal falls apart. I think you're saving money, and I truly believe that with my heart. I know that you might not agree with that statement. It's not great to have to get multiple inspections on multiple properties. However, if property A comes back with a lot of issues that make you uncomfortable and you don't see yourself having the money to fix these things, and the seller doesn't want to fix these things to get the deal done, you should certainly be able to walk away from the transaction and feel just fine about it. You did not waste $500-$600 on an inspection. Maybe you saved $300, $400, $500,000 not buying that house, and then all the problems that the inspector is telling you about. I do want to be clear that an inspection is not an appraisal. Appraisal is for value, and that comes after the inspection contingency is removed. Why? Because why would I want to spend money on an appraisal for a house that I'm not going to purchase? So the lender wants to know that you want the house. I'm buying this one. I did my inspection. I'm removing the contingency, which is me saying I'm good with moving forward. I don't have any, contingency is a fancy word for exception, right? It's not yes, but it's yes. I did my due diligence. I did my homework. I hired my people. Now that can be all sorts of things. Let's talk about that for a moment. It could be inspecting a well or a septic if it's a rural property. You definitely need time to make sure that those things are working order, that the water's safe to drink, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you want to get a radon test. In our area, radon is a very interesting topic because certain areas are very well known for having high radon levels. And some is very property specific. A neighbor across the street could have a really high reading and the house that you're purchasing could be low. That doesn't mean the test results are wrong. It's just that's how Minnesota is. It's different in different places. We don't typically test for termites, which I understand is common in the South or the warmer states. We just don't have that problem. I was saying we don't have termites in Minnesota. I guess we do. Have never seen them. It's just not something we talk about. You could test for some sort of insects or stuff like that if you suspected it. The things I've seen is if there's a beehive or ants or mice, often a traditional inspection will tell you if we have a problem with some sort of pests. Other things that are common in Minnesota is checking the sewer lines. You may want to pay extra money to send a camera down there and make sure there's no tree roots or things like cracking or things that are happening. Unfortunately, getting a sewer line repaired, whether you do the lining from the inside or you have to do the full excavation process, neither of these things are particularly inexpensive. And you may be, you could definitely be like me and just like wait and see if a sewer problem happens, or you can inspect it during that period. Again, because you want to, because you can. It's your right as a buyer to inspect what you want. And the last thing I can think of is chimneys. If you're getting a traditional wood burning fireplace, you may want to do what's called a level 2 chimney inspection, which again will cost you extra money. But you will bring out a chimney specialist and then they will inspect that for you to tell you if it's a safe idea to start fires. And just personally, after doing this job for a while, I would be very reluctant to start a fire in a house, I mean, in the fireplace, obviously, without some sort of chimney inspection. I feel like I hear most of the time there's chimney issues on properties, things that are missing, things that are cracking, things that need repair. None of these things are particularly cheap. Just to kind of warn you up front, I just feel like chimneys are like an expensive topic. And I would not want to burn my house down simply because I didn't want to get an inspection. So I'm talking about beyond like just getting it cleaned, which is, you know, probably like another thing that you're going to have to do with chimneys. That's why we see a lot of people convert those to gas or electric inserts, because maybe the expense for doing that versus the long-term maintenance of a wood chimney fireplace. You know, that's why you see those trade-offs. We are going to set deadlines on all those things. You don't get an infinite amount of time to do inspections. And again, I really want you to get one. I do not want that to be misconstrued what I said earlier. However, it is completely a choice. So depending on how competitive the situation is, we might want to write the offer so that the time is very limited, that it's like, we're going to get under contract and we're going to order this. And just to give you an idea clear, it's going to go get a yes from the seller, give them the earnest money, order the inspection, and that's all probably going to happen on the same day. I do not mess around. If there, you know, obviously if something's going on in my life and I can't help you move those things through quickly, I would certainly tell you that, but I just feel like those things need to happen quickly because we don't have a lot of time. Well and septic inspections, we traditionally build in a little bit longer of time. And the other thing that we should talk about is another really common contingency is if you're buying a townhouse or a condo or even a single family residence that has an HOA, we are going to build in the rules, the state rule that we get 10 days to review those documents. So you may be going into the purchase going, well, I want this townhouse, but I want to know if they take dogs. I want this townhouse, but I don't know if they allow rentals. We may not be able to extract that information for you in the shopping phase. I know it might be a big ask to go under contract and then review the documents, but there's a myriad of things that could come up in those documents outside of your main concerns that may make you want to turn the ship around and not purchase this house. So the cool thing is you can get that inspection done, you can have that time to review your HOA documents, and you still have every right to get your earnest money back and walk away if there's something on there that concerns you. I think this is my last contingency to talk to you about briefly. If you have a house to sell, that can be another contingency. We don't see that one very often. It is going to be much stronger for you that if that house is at least under contract with a buyer, that's going to put you in a much better position to actually get another house under contract. When you try to write an offer on a house and you're like, yep, I got to sell this one and I got to take the equity, not only are you telling your seller that I have to take time to clean it and prep it and hire a real estate agent and they need to get the pictures and we need to get ready for showings, and you're building all these things in your head. Okay, so now we're at 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Okay, so 4 weeks from now, I will be ready to put my house on the market. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, will you wait until my house is ready? And then that whole time, just like keep it off the market. I'm going to buy it. And then when I find a qualified buyer, that's the catch, and I close. Okay, so then build another 30 to 45 days on that. Then I'll buy your house. So can you wait 60 days while I get all this together? The answer is typically going to be no. I have many times written offers for people with this. I am fully having this conversation with them that this is a big, big ask. And anybody else showing interest in the house is going to bump you. Now, the way you could overcome that, of course, is with money. You could say, I'm going to give you more than everybody else if you give me that 60 days to get this done. There's still a huge risk in you as a buyer, because you could back out anytime. You could say, oh, I've had a change of heart. I couldn't find a buyer. My buyer backed out. You can see it's a domino effect. Again, it's a very scary proposition to someone selling their house that needs to move on with their life for whatever's happening for them to wait for you. Again, there's always exceptions to the rule. If you need to sell your house, and the lender says that you need to do this, then we have to tell them about the contingency. If you have a house to sell, there's other creative ways to solve the problem other than putting the contingency on there. It just depends on your comfortability with this. There are alternative lenders out there that will give you pre-approvals without the house being sold. I can definitely share those with you. You could get a bridge loan. You could recast your loan. You could get a HELOC in certain situations. I'm being really generic. I'm not a loan officer. This is why it's so important for you to work on your pre-approval, especially if you have a house to sell. We need to know the order in which we can do things. And the amount of people out there that want to purchase their house before they sell their house far trumps the other way around. It is a little, it's a hard sell for me to tell somebody that they have to sell their house before they buy a house. That makes people feel very insecure. A lot of times it is striking like a logistical nerve for them. What am I supposed to do with my dogs and my children, and they're in school and this is happening, and I don't want to buy a house that I'm going to settle for, and I don't want it. And so for you, we need to talk about that. And so I am going to take kind of a bird walk here. We can have that conversation. I have at least 5 different ways that we can navigate that situation. And we can definitely come back to the conclusion that you are going to buy a house before you sell a house. I'm going to be the first person to tell you there is risk, and there will be emotions that will be paired with that decision that I can't control, but I can warn you about. And the first one is you're going to be really uncomfortable when you don't know what your house is going to sell for and how long it's going to take. The pressure you're going to put on yourself and your real estate agent will be unbelievable, because you purchased a house and you really don't know what that house is selling for. And there is no guarantee your house is going to sell. So there's a lot to unpack on that topic. So I'm just going to move past it, but that is certainly a contingency you have to add if your loan officer is saying that it is a barrier to you purchasing, that has to be a contingency. We can't leave that off. We have to be honest about that position that you're in. Let's move on to closing cost credits. This does tie into what you're offering price wise, and there is no one way to ask for closing cost credits. We call those seller paid closing costs. And so especially if you're a first time home buyer, you need to know when you write an offer, are you in a position to fully pay your closing costs on your own, and what are they going to cost for this house? It's a really hard question for me to answer. Be writing offers with people, and then they're looking to me to tell them that amount. Lenders will tell you what that is and if you're going to need that assistance. Now, I think we can all figure out that asking for this, it's a gift. If you have to ask for it, it is a request and it can be denied. And so therefore, it can take you longer to find a house, to find a seller who's agreeing upon the willingness, we'll say, to pay your closing costs. You need to be prepared for that emotionally and mentally up front, that those that don't need to ask for closing costs, again, in multiple offers, may trump you. Now, there's ways that you can overcome it. Again, if you need, let's say, 3%, because you're going to get down payment assistance, and then you want the closing costs help because you don't have the money saved up at this time in your life, which is perfectly fine. There's no judgment behind what I just said there. What you can do is make it up to the seller by offering them more money, which is something we often do. And I know it's hard for people because they want to go in low and then they want to ask for the closing costs. So you're basically asking for 2 gifts. That's the easiest way I can say it. So You need to be prepared for a no, and you need to be prepared that they're going to go with another offer. Now, if you're the only one writing an offer and the house has been on the market for a long time, you never know. They might say yes. They might say, I'll meet you halfway. There's compromises that can happen. But this is you asking for help with all of the closing costs. And we all have closing costs, whether we're a seller or a buyer. So remember that too. The seller doesn't have as much as you do because they're not taking out a loan, but they have their own closing costs. So that hits their bottom line. If you have the cash, it's typically not a strong position to ask just to ask. There's no rules here. So if you want to ask just to ask, you certainly can, but you may want to balance that out. And we can certainly talk about that at another time. Moving on to home warranties, there is a question asking if you want to get one. You could get one for yourself. You could ask the seller. Again, it's a gift. I am no home warranty salesperson. You can definitely Google the words Minnesota home warranty, and you'll see a handful of companies that you can purchase a home warranty with. You may want to ask at a later date. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the initial offer writing. So for example, let's say you get an inspection and there's just a lot of little things and the appliances are old and the furnace is old and you're just like, I don't know, some of this stuff is going to maybe like die in the next year or two. Then go get a warranty to just give you that little bit of sense of mental relief that, I've got this and maybe it won't hit me so hard out of pocket. You can purchase one for yourself at any time. There's one company that does it for 13 months, but most of them are a 12-month period. And it's, something you want to weigh. I have had people with condos and townhouses waive the inspection and ask for a home warranty instead. So, and that's because they're just working on the inside of the property. They're not responsible for the outside. And so that's something to weigh too, is like, would I rather get a home warranty, whether I pay for it or they pay for it? Is that a better direction for my position? And again, if it's new construction, if this property's old, there's just so many things here to factor in on home warranties. I just recommend you do your own research because typically there's 3 levels: gold, silver, platinum for most of these companies. Again, most of them are 12 months. They all cover different things. And so when somebody turns to me and says, well, why don't you know? There's no way I could know. I've never worked for a home warranty company. We're going to Google this. You're going to have to read the small print. And so, it's just another thing you have to consider, and maybe it's just not for you, and that's fine too. Before we move on to step 7, let's talk about what happens when we don't get a yes on a property. You're not always going to get a yes, and that's hard because where you got to emotionally and mentally to say yes to that house on your own terms and then to turn around and lose it, whether it's a multiple offer situation or it could have just been 1-to-1 and they just didn't like the terms and they flat out say no. It doesn't feel very good. You should be prepared that this is different. When we go to the store and we buy something, we aren't typically told no if we have the money for it. They just sell it to us and like life moves on, and frankly, there's 100 or 1,000 more of the exact same thing that somebody else can buy. And so it's not limited. There's just so few things in life that we purchase where it's like, this is the only pair of glasses and I wanted that and then you bought it and I didn't get to have it. And so you are going to be in a different space when you go from a high of yes, like I found my house, and then the next day after going through all that work of writing this offer that you thought was going to get accepted, it's a no. And so to get prepared for that feeling is an important step that I want you to be considered. It's not the end of the world. It really isn't. You've done harder things in your life than this. In the moment, that's a little simplistic of me. That might not feel like that, and I will not lie. I'm disconnected. I haven't purchased a personal house in over 15 years. I know you might not believe me, but a lot of times the next one you write on is actually better than the one before. We are in the last chapter. We're talking about what happens once we get that accepted offer and now getting to the closing date. I touched on some of this in the last segment. The earnest money has to be submitted within 2 business days. The inspection is going to be ordered immediately. All of the inspections, you're going to have to make decisions quickly about what you want inspected. How deep are you going? Are you getting the chimney and the sewer and all those things inspected? or are you going to keep it relatively simple? We have very strict deadlines, and it's my job to continue to follow that along and make sure we don't miss anything. The next thing after that is the appraisal. It's my job to tell the title company and the lender that those contingencies have been removed and they will now order the appraisal. After that, many times the offer has something about kind of a loan commitment. We call it a written statement in Minnesota. It's kind of like a second pre-approval letter. We send that out typically 1 to 2 weeks before the closing, confirming to the seller that we are on track for getting you money. This is a really big deal if you haven't picked up on that. Nobody wants to sell their house to somebody who actually can't financially afford the property. So anyway, at the appraisal, you do not attend that appointment. I typically would not attend that appointment as a buyer's agent, though I'm certain there are always exceptions to the rule. Seller sometimes leaves the house, sometimes they don't. It's not like a long appointment. They take pictures, they walk around, they might ask about the seller, what have they done over the years to improve their house. In the meantime, what you are going to do is work on getting your home insurance figured out. That will be a requirement if you're getting a loan on a house, and your loan officer is going to be your best resource if you need help with what you need to obtain prior to closing in terms of home insurance. Don't delay whenever they ask you to start doing that. Get your quotes and start moving forward. Nobody can tell you how much your home insurance is going to be until, it all starts coming together. Unfortunately, at the time of making this video, home insurance is very expensive. It's gone up. It's remarkable. It may be rather shocking to you. Your loan officer is doing the best they can to give you accurate quotes throughout the process. When you get to the last 1 to 2 weeks before your closing date, it'll be your responsibility to start working on transferring utilities into your name. A service I provide to my clients is I will do my best to try to figure out which utilities you need to start working on. Sometimes you have to do your own research. If there's an HOA, you're going to follow the guidelines of what they are required. So you want to start taking care of that. Same if you're selling, you're going to want to start getting your name out of things so you're not paying. But don't forget about the little things like telling the post office that you're getting a new address. Maybe, I know saying magazines is kind of outdated, but all that little stuff that, you might be getting shipped to your house, subscriptions, you have things like that. So I shouldn't say magazines because that ages me. Work on that, because the last thing you want to do is move into your new house and find out you don't have any water because you just never made that phone call. So now we're at the very last step, which is we're going to do your final walkthrough. It's really not that big of a deal. We're checking for things, and typically people do them, but not always. I'm not going to lie to you guys. You can do a final walkthrough and not be real happy with what you're seeing. So the main component here, and I think everybody says this to people differently, but the main goal here is this property should basically look the way it did when we did our showing about a month ago. There shouldn't be a new hole in the wall, as an example. Let's go even bigger. What if there was a tornado last night? I'm certainly not buying the house if there's no house there anymore. That's dramatic, obviously. Here's the things we're looking for. This is simple. Did the seller move out? Did they leave it relatively clean? That topic is complicated because your concept of clean and my concept of clean will never be the same thing. Trust me, they won't. So there's many times I'm working with people where they're not particularly happy with the cleanliness. We don't have a lot in the contract to protect you on that topic. If it's really bad, you can ask for some sort of credit or concession for that, but that isn't necessarily a guarantee. We're looking to see if there's personal property. I've been on both sides. I've had people leave things behind that they really should have never left behind. It's so critical that if you are selling a house, you take your stuff with you and you leave nothing behind that wasn't agreed upon. Even an excessive amount of paint cans, I've had people say, there's far too many paint cans and I have to run this to a special, special dumpster site for this. And I'm not particularly happy that I have to do that. So cleanliness, personal property. Did you ask for repairs during inspection period? Did they do that? You're going to check and make sure that the appliances they said would stay behind are still there. Things are still working the way they did. This is not the time to do your inspection. I don't know how else to say that. I've had people do that, where they're basically doing their first inspection at the final walkthrough and then voicing issues. Do that earlier in the process. You do not want to be 5 minutes away from your closing time saying, oh, well, I could have done an inspection. I didn't know this didn't work. And that, that's just not a great position for you to be in as a buyer. You're just your gambling level, your risk level is pretty high at that point that's going to work out for you. Most people are going to be conscientious and try to leave that house for you really nice. Like there's some people that will truly go up and beyond and hire cleaning companies and get the carpet cleaned and touched up paint. And there's, of course, people who will leave you with 100 holes in the wall and unexpected surprises like too many paint cans and cabinets you're going to have to scrub and things like that. So this is a spectrum way, but I think you should go into it positive. And, if these things are very important to you, be prepared for them instead of surprised that, you're going to have to take some time out of your day to clean the fridge. Maybe set it up in advance that you're going to have a cleaning company come the next day, things like that. But most people are aware that they don't want the transaction to go poorly because your expectations are not on the same page. What I always tell people when we do a walkthrough, if you do not find that home to be in particularly clean condition at that day, it's not going to be great when you do your final walkthrough. I don't think you should be surprised by that. I'm going to say this in the least condescending way I mean, because all of our definitions of clean, there's no one rule of what's clean. And so when you're, remarkably surprised that the house is pretty much the same as it was that day, this is how I think about it. The seller was probably working with a real estate agent. He or she told them, we get the house as clean as we can, we stage it, we declutter, we depersonalize this house, get it to your best place. The day you saw it was the best. Not your best, their best. So again, not trying to be condescending. So now you do your final walkthrough 30 days later, and you think it's still a pigsty, for lack of better terms. That's their best. It really is. And so you come back and you want money for them to clean and do these things, and they're not going to understand. They're going to think, I gave you my best. That's my best. And that's what they expect. When you go to your closing, typically the seller is going to pre-sign, so you are no longer going to meet this person like you would have pre-COVID. We've kind of eliminated that, and it doesn't seem like it's going to come back. So the seller pre-signed days or a week before you did with their real estate agent and their closing company. You had picked your closing company long before that. That's when you get your keys. That's when you're going to sign all your loan documents. Some lenders will have you pre-sign or e-sign is what I meant to say, the day of, and they can do that, and they'll have you do a majority of them. And then when you're at the closing company working with the title person, they're going to have you sign a couple more documents that you're not done. There's some wet signatures that are going to happen. That's where I'm going to give you the keys, is the actual closing. You're going to bring your driver's license, and typically most of us have to bring some money. That amount, the address, all those details will be supplied to you typically by both the title and the lender, but very much the loan officer. So if you have any questions about the money you're supposed to bring or that part of the process, you very much want to continue to work with your loan officer and your title company. The deed and the title gets transferred to you legally that day, not the day they pre-sign, but the day you sign. And behind the scenes, the closer and the lender is wrapping everything up to get everything transferred over to you in a legal way. So now you are the legal owner. All of the behind the scenes stuff is done. You obviously can move in whenever your possession date is based on your contract. For most of you, that will be immediately after closing. It is your property. My last tip for you, and thank you for making it to the end for me, is change your locks and your codes. Don't forget, neighbors, family members might have not known that this person has since moved out of this property, and God forbid somebody came in that you were not expecting. So I highly recommend getting a locksmith or putting it on your high to-do list to get those locks and codes changed at your earliest convenience. And don't forget, new construction people, same for you. Every single subcontractor and contractor has been marching in and out of your property with probably some really basic code like 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're going to leave it 1, 2, 3, 4, just remember, not that I think any of those people care to come back into your house, but you're basically giving them the keys to enter a house now with all your personal belongings. If you are ready to take the next step and start looking at houses, or you have any questions about purchasing that I did not touch on, this is a very long video for me, but I appreciate that you made it to the end. Please hit that button to get my information and set up on our calendars a time for us to talk and take the next steps. Have a great day.